The political spotlight has once again shifted toward Georgia, and this time the stakes are enormous. What many expected to be a straightforward Senate primary has suddenly transformed into one of the most closely watched political battles in America. Across the country, political analysts, campaign strategists, media organizations, and millions of voters are watching every update, because the outcome of Georgia may influence not only one Senate seat, but potentially the balance of power in Washington itself. Recent results indicate that the Republican primary race did not produce a clear winner, forcing the contest into a runoff between two major candidates. For years, Georgia was considered a reliable Republican state, but recent elections changed that perception completely. Political observers now classify Georgia as one of America's most important swing states, a place where small shifts in voter behavior can create national consequences. Democrats shocked many analysts by winning key statewide races in recent years, while Republicans continued searching for a strategy that could return them to dominance. The state is no longer viewed as safely red or comfortably blue. Instead, Georgia has become political ground zero. The central figure waiting in this political drama is incumbent Senator Jon Ossoff. Unlike the intense Republican battle, Ossoff moved through the Democratic side without major opposition and has spent months preparing for the larger fight ahead. Reports suggest he entered this election cycle with a massive campaign war chest and significant organizational strength. But while Ossoff calmly prepared for November, Republicans launched a fierce internal contest. Several candidates stepped into the race, believing Georgia represented one of their strongest opportunities to reclaim a Senate seat. Among the most prominent names were Mike Collins, Derek Dooley, and Buddy Carter. Each candidate tried to present himself as the Republican most capable of defeating Ossoff. Initially, many expected a traditional campaign focused on taxes, immigration, inflation, and the economy. Instead, the Republican race quickly became a contest over identity and political direction. Candidates competed aggressively for conservative voters and especially for support from the MAGA movement. Campaign ads became sharper, speeches became more aggressive, debates turned personal, and the race slowly evolved into a political survival battle. One unusual factor stood out immediately. Former President Donald Trump did not endorse a candidate. In modern Republican politics, Trump endorsements often reshape elections instantly. Candidates frequently seek his approval because his support can energize loyal voters and influence fundraising. Yet in this race, Trump remained largely on the sidelines. Analysts called it one of the rare major Republican contests without direct Trump intervention. Without that endorsement, candidates had to build their own coalitions. Mike Collins emerged as a strong pro-Trump conservative voice. His campaign focused heavily on border security, immigration, and national conservative themes. Collins worked to appeal directly to MAGA supporters by presenting himself as a fighter willing to challenge Washington institutions. Derek Dooley entered from a very different background. Known primarily as a football coach rather than a career politician, Dooley attempted to market himself as an outsider. Outsider candidates often appeal to voters frustrated with traditional politics. Dooley argued that professional politicians had failed ordinary Americans and that fresh leadership was needed. He also benefited from support associated with Georgia Governor Brian Kemp. Kemp's political influence made Dooley an important competitor. Meanwhile, Buddy Carter tried positioning himself as another conservative option, hoping his congressional experience and policy record would distinguish him. However, as campaigning intensified, all three candidates increasingly attacked each other. Television ads criticized records, questioned credibility, and attempted to undermine opponents. The campaign atmosphere became increasingly tense. Election night finally arrived, and political observers waited for a decisive result. Instead, Georgia delivered more uncertainty. Under Georgia election rules, a candidate must receive over 50% of the vote to secure victory outright. That threshold matters because crowded races often divide support. As results came in, no candidate crossed the required line. Mike Collins finished ahead, but Derek Dooley narrowly secured second place, while Buddy Carter fell short. The result triggered an official runoff election. Suddenly, the race became even more complicated. Instead of moving toward unity, Republicans now face additional weeks of campaigning and potentially deeper divisions. Runoffs can be unpredictable because turnout often changes. Voters who participated in the first round may not return. Candidate momentum can shift. New endorsements can reshape perceptions. Small changes sometimes produce major surprises. For Democrats, the runoff may create an advantage. While Republicans continue fighting internally, Jon Ossoff gains time. He can raise money, build organization, strengthen messaging, and prepare for the general election, while his future opponent spends resources in another political battle. Analysts increasingly suggest that prolonged Republican infighting may indirectly strengthen Ossoff's position. Political history also explains why Georgia receives extraordinary attention. In recent years, statewide elections repeatedly produced razor-thin margins. Small demographic shifts transformed the state into a genuine battleground. Suburban voters around Atlanta became especially influential. Younger voters, urban populations, and changing migration patterns altered the political map. These changes forced both parties to rethink old assumptions. The broader national context makes everything more important. Senate control affects judicial appointments, legislation, investigations, economic policy, and executive priorities. Even a single seat can matter enormously. Political strategists from both parties understand that Georgia may become one of the decisive contests determining future power in Washington. Campaign money reflects those stakes. Large donations and national political organizations are expected to pour resources into Georgia. Advertising budgets may reach extraordinary levels. Political action committees will likely flood television, digital platforms, and social media with competing narratives designed to influence public opinion. The upcoming runoff now creates a new political question. Who benefits from additional time? Mike Collins enters with momentum because he led the initial round. Supporters argue that leading first place demonstrates broad appeal among Republican voters. But momentum does not always guarantee victory. Derek Dooley supporters counter with a different argument. They believe Dooley can unite multiple Republican factions and appeal to suburban independents who may decide the general election. Supporters associated with Governor Brian Kemp suggest electability matters more than ideological intensity. That debate reflects a larger struggle occurring across Republican politics nationally. Should candidates focus primarily on energizing core conservative voters? Or should campaigns emphasize broader appeal capable of attracting moderates and independents? Georgia's Senate race increasingly symbolizes that national conversation. Meanwhile, Democrats appear relatively unified behind Jon Ossoff. His campaign messaging has emphasized policy achievements and constituent work rather than dramatic political confrontation. Supporters argue that stability and practical governance resonate with voters exhausted by non-stop political conflict. Still, Georgia remains unpredictable. American political history repeatedly demonstrates that polling, expectations, and early narratives sometimes collapse under real voter behavior. Unexpected turnout patterns can transform races overnight. Economic events can alter public mood. National controversies can redirect attention instantly. That uncertainty explains why Georgia continues attracting intense media attention. Television networks, political websites, and election analysts understand that Georgia rarely follows simple scripts anymore. Now America enters the next phase of this story. The runoff campaign begins. Candidates will travel across Georgia holding rallies, appearing on television, releasing new advertisements, and competing for every possible voter. Accusations will intensify, messaging will sharpen, pressure will increase. And waiting beyond that runoff is an even larger confrontation, the general election battle for one of America's most important Senate seats. The Georgia Senate race is no longer simply a local contest. It has become a national political battlefield. And the next chapter may determine much more than anyone originally expected. Recent reporting confirms the Republican Senate race advanced to a June runoff between Mike Collins and Derek Dooley, while Jon Ossoff remains positioned for the general election.